refugee landscape. So this time we cross to Uganda, where it's officially been announced that it will stop granting refugee status to new arrivals from Ethiopia, Somalia and Eritrea. The government says the decision stems from sharply reduced donor funding and mounting most generous asylum systems. Those from the three countries who already have refugee status will not be stripped of it, but as of today, new applications from these nationalities will effectively be closed. We now speak to Victor Nyamori, researcher and advisor on refugees and migrant rights at Amnesty International. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening to you. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you.
I've just been speaking to a colleague of yours in the United States, looking at how things are changing there, how President Trump is going to retroactively vet people who'd already received refugee status in the United States. And of course, looking at Uganda and how it's been dealing with refugees and its relationship with the United States on accepting third country deportation. So how does this picture, this latest picture that we're highlighting, contrast, or at least how does it build on the picture of how Uganda sees refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, etc.?
Indeed, thank you very much. I think one thing we need to accept is Uganda has been a very good host for refugees in the region. It's one of the countries in the region that has been celebrated so much because refugee numbers at this particular time, we are looking at about 2 million refugees in Uganda, with quite a relatively a good freedom and rights within Uganda. Refugees are being registered, welcome, access to opportunity, including job market, access to freedom of movement, access to land. And so relatively, refugees are welcomed well in Uganda. But unfortunately, the statement given today by the minister in charge of disaster regarding the three states is quite shocking. Indeed, we understand the landing scape for funding has reduced, but we have to accept the fact that people still run away from different issues and conflict and persecution, human rights violations, for them to seek protection in their country where they want to seek refuge. So it's quite unfortunate, and I hope the government of Uganda can be able to reconsider these options and allow refugees to be able to access Uganda. And blanketly condemning specifically countries from Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia is quite unfortunate also, because these countries are still facing quite a number of challenges within their front lines.
And is there any particular reason for, highlighting those three countries, singling them out as not being able to receive refugee status?
What the minister indicated was that these particular countries are not at war at this particular moment. But we have to be alive to the fact that refugees don't only come because of war or do not cross borders because of reasons related to war. Persecutions is a major issues on refugees, and individualized risks that people face make them decide to cross border and seek for refuge. So when you think of a woman who is facing gender-based violence in Somalia or Ethiopia and decided to seek asylum in Uganda, arriving today, will face challenges and not being registered as per what the minister indicated. This leaves them at a very precarious situation because when you are not registered, when you are not documented, the risk that you face in the country of asylum is quite more dire than the one that if you are already registered. This obviously will lead to irregular migrations within the region, but also across the continent, because people will seek for a place where they can feel at home and they can feel protected by the country where they are in.
It was just interesting to listen to your colleague that we were speaking to in the US, who is saying the reversal of refugee status of those who already had attained it under Biden administration actually will have implications beyond policy, but just in terms of operationally. But he was pointing out the fact that the funding and the services that are extended often come from NGOs. It's outside of government that raises the funds. So in this case, Uganda is you know, crying out saying that it doesn't have the funding. So does that mean that the picture is different in Uganda, that it's more the government that is helping house people just in terms of the refugee protection services there, or could there be a different motive?
I mean, it's quite true. The funding situation in the refugee sector within Uganda has significantly reduced. As of today, or as of mid this year, UNHCR reported that it only received 17% of the funding that it had requested for the operation for the year. And as of August, they talked of about 25% of the operational funding. At the moment now, we have food assistance that has reduced within the refugee community. We have jobs that are mostly within that were receiving funding from, US aid have cut down. Quite a number of people are not operating in the camps, and refugees themselves are stepping up to take up these opportunities to be able to respond to their community. But the fact is, with no funding, obviously things are reduced. Food situation is not only affecting Uganda. We have situation in Kenya actually where food assistance has been reduced to the extent that a human being is given less than about 30% of their daily needs. And so that leaves them in a very difficult situation. So we hope, as much as the Uganda has issues with funding, it is important, we must not forget the protection principle and the idea that people cross border to seek for protection need to be accorded an opportunity to register, have their claims considered and assessed individually, not as a blanket, so that they can be able to see if they fall within the protections that are guaranteed in the 1951 Convention or the African Union Agreement, Convention on Protection of Refugees in Africa.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Victor Nyamori, researcher and advisor on refugee and migrants' rights at Amnesty International. It's exactly 20 minutes.